Hello, welcome to the Daily Telegraph NRL Podcast. Paul Crawley and Fatima Kadoo joining me. Adam Mobbs, round 27 done and dusted. The finals teams are set. And are you in? Is your team in?
Absolutely.
My team's not. And yeah, okay, well, anyone. We can move on now. I don't know how long your team's going to be in after the weekend, but big lot of finals matches this weekend. I really like the idea of kicking off with Broncos Storm and seeing the mind games between Craig Bellamy and Kevin Walters. They both rested stack of players last week, had a couple of injuries they need to overcome. The Storm continue that amazing record against the Broncos up in Brisbane, and for a team that's had such a great year, the Broncos, who were fighting for a minor premiership, Fatima, to now being looking at, out of all the opportunities of people you could play, Melbourne would have been their least desirable, you reckon?
Their least desirable. And I think regardless of what the outcome would have been, there was a chance. So if the Broncos won, it was probably still going to be 1v4 anyway. So it was a first week matchup that they were not going to be able to avoid. And 14 games in a row against Brisbane. Brisbane haven't beaten them up at Suncorp since 2009, and I get the feeling that the Storm are going to force Brisbane to do this the hard way if they are going to be there in the grand final.
Yeah, big game crawls. I don't know. Can Kevy do it? It'll be a masterstroke to get the win over Bellamy and the Storm now.
It really would, because, you know, this isn't a hoodoo that's manufactured. To go back to 2009 and to understand what it's been built on, like Bellamy, who was, you know, the assistant under Wayne, and, you know, he drove this from within the rivalry with Brisbane. And then you had Cameron Smith come through and Cooper Cronk and Billy Slater, and Cameron was like, you know, the Broncos wanted him at one stage, but Billy wasn't the player he was as a child, and Cooper never really got an offer, I don't think, from the Broncos. And so from there, Bellamy has created this fierce rivalry that has then been driven through the playing group, and even now with Harry Grant and Cameron Munster and that, it continues. And look, they're the bogey team for the Broncos. And as good as Brisbane has been all year, I'll be tipping the Storm against them.
Yeah. Well, let's look at this. So Friday night, qualifying final. Broncos, the second seed against Storm 3 up there at Suncorp. Saturday, 4:05, qualifying final. Panthers, minor premiers against the Warriors out there at Bluebet Stadium. Saturday night, Sharks versus Roosters in an elimination final at PointsBet Stadium, where 3 men and a dog can get in there and watch it. So that'll be interesting. And then, you know, we know that one will be a sellout because there's not many seats. But the other one that's going to be a sellout, elimination final, Knights v Raiders up at McDonald Jones Stadium with an unstoppable force at the moment in Newcastle. Who would have thought Newcastle would go in on the back of 9 wins and be killing it the way they are?
Well, you just put it in context. Adam O'Brien was gone. Like he even said on the weekend, he was lining up in Centrelink, you know, and from there, 9 straight wins on the weekend without Ponga, without Jackson Hastings, without Phoenix Crossland, and they are a force at the moment. They've got that feel like Parramatta in 2009, the Warriors in 2011. They're just charging, and they're playing with so much belief.
And good point there, Crawls, about thinking that AB was gone at one point, because we get criticised like, oh, you just want to get coaches knifed or anything like that. No, we want to see teams going well. And we've seen what Adam O'Brien has had at his disposal. I never thought they'd be this good. I don't think they were a 5th place team, but that is what he's got them doing and how he's got them humming along at this time of the season. Massive achievement for him.
Massive achievement for him. And yeah, like the guy was ready to be tapped on the shoulder. And on the back of, and look, let's be fair to Ingham about this. There's a lot of factors. He has got them going really well, but Ponga is having a run at the moment that, you know, it's been said, it's like Hayne in 2009. For mine, it's like Joey, how he used to be able to pick the Knights up off the canvas. And without him, this wouldn't have happened. But now, without him, they showed on the weekend they can do it. And they get him back this week, and who knows what they're capable of. But the origin period, the fact that Billy Slater didn't pick him and went with Reece Walsh, and that seemed to have lit a fuse in Ponga that's just brought him to life.
Yeah. We'll get into these finals games shortly, but Fatima, for the 8 teams that made it, there's a few that didn't, and our top 8 dropouts, who's been most disappointing for you? South Sydney went out with a whimper. North Queensland didn't fire a shot against a Penrith team who were really in the mood, and a team that had the bye at the weekend and just fell agonisingly short. We won't talk about that blue and gold team from Sydney's West. Thoughts?
It's hard to split them because there's genuine reason to be disappointed in each of those teams. Like Parramatta were grand finalists. You know, how do you go from being grand finalists to missing the top 8? You know, North Queensland seemed to be a completely rejuvenated outfit last season and fall by the wayside. South Sydney were leading competitions after 8 rounds and looked like world beaters. And if you think back to that time, it was Penrith that looked like they had faltered a little bit, and it seemed as though South Sydney had closed the gap between them and Penrith. And then all of a sudden, all those 3 teams are not there. I mean, I think obviously South Sydney had a really, really tough 2 weeks leading up into that Roosters game, but North Queensland had a lot to play for and really showed very little resolve. The energy wasn't there. I think Todd Payton was rightly pretty scathing of them in the post-match, pretty much said there's one bloke of the 17 that he picked that could hold his head up, and that was Luciano Leilua, and he was one of the only guys who played like that game meant something to him. So when you have big games like that and players don't show up, that's a worrying sign.
And given his speech at the Dally M's last year when he won Coach of the Year, and he basically wanted to be back to training the next day, to then miss the finals the next year is disappointing. Cross, want to get your thoughts on South Sydney. So they're out now, but geez, tell you what, this war of words continues to bubble along in the periphery here, because Craig Coleman, Phil Rothfield had it at the weekend that Craig Field was pretty scathing of Lachlan Ilias in a Facebook post, and something to which Craig Coleman appeared to have liked. I know we can all hit that like button.
Jason Demetrio hit
yes,
the like button.
Inadvertently at times. Braith and Anasta's come out and defended his client, and then Tuggers said, well, hang on a second, I'm allowed to have an opinion of Lachlan. It's the same with you getting into Latrell. Where do you stand on all this?
I think Tugger's right in this instance. Braith, let's understand it. Braith looks after Lachlan, and he's looking after his client. He's got his client's best interest. Lachlan's he's in a tough spot at the moment because he's a young kid that's been brought in to follow on from a champion. You know, he didn't make that call. Jason Demetrio and the club made that call.
Yep.
Adam Reynolds really wanted to stay, but he wanted a little bit of security beyond 1 year, and they would only give him 1 year. And at the time, he was desperately disappointed. But he's moved on now. But Souths haven't. And now we've gone from having this team who, after round 11, you thought that they were the main threat to Penrith, and then from that point on, they've just imploded. Am I right? Was it that leading into that Parramatta game? It was a special round. Was it the Indigenous round? It was some special round, and they seemed to lose focus that week.
They did.
And Parramatta went out and put the cleaners through them.
Yep.
And then since then, all this other stuff emerged, and regardless of who leaked the story from within, that Sam Burgess wasn't happy with the standards that were being met at the club. Regardless of that, the fact is the proof's in the pudding. And so my view now is, after watching this season just collapse, it's been a crash and burn that, you know, of massive proportions. There has to be more than Sam Burgess, who ends up being the scapegoat for what has gone wrong at Souths this season. And I truly believe, and this is not personal with Jason Demetrio, but this is the truth, he now goes into next season as the coach most under fire, because he's in charge of a team that has basically gone from playing in 5 prelim finals to spectacularly missing the 8. And there's more dramas within that club than they want to make out, but they've got to face up to it. And can he be the man to bring them back?
Yeah. What do you think, Fatima? Do you think he's the guy to do it? Do you think South, with the roster they've got, are capable of doing it? Do you see any changes there?
With the roster that South have got, I mean, you look at Latrell, Cody Walker, Damien Cook, Cam Murray, you know, their forward pack. Jack Whiten next year, Alex Johnston. If I'm a Bunnies fan, I'm expecting, if I'm got that roster at my disposal, I'm expecting to be playing finals every single year. and not just playing finals, like Crawl said, competing for a title. So the fact that he's had all that at his disposal, JT, and hasn't been able to get them over the line, that does suggest that there might be something going on internally off the field. They might want to deny it, but as Crawl said, the proof is in the fact that they've missed the finals this year.
Geez, Campbell Graham must be busted. You see the way, and Billy Smith scored a brilliant try around him on Friday night, and I love watching young Smith play. I'm so happy for him, given the terrible injuries that he's had over the last couple of years. But Campbell Graham doesn't get beaten in defence like that unless he's busted. And that sternum injury, he must have been carrying that for a while and be really causing him some issues.
He's been carrying it since Origin time, because that was the reason why he was named and then had to...
It wasn't his sternum that missed that tackle, though. He just got beaten. Smith just beat him. That was a really poor miss. You know, he'd been defending well in that game up until that point. And Smith just went past him and showed what an outstanding young player he is. But again, the Rabbitohs on the night, they needed to aim up better. There's no question in the world. You keep going back to the fact that Adam's not there. You know what I mean? They've put Lockie Ilias doesn't play the same game. He hasn't got the same instinct, the same craft, and it's not a knock on him. He's a young man that's been brought into that. But that decision has been a really, really massive blunder.
Well, it's a decision that's done a disservice to both the side as a whole and to Lockie himself, because I think what we've seen this year is Lockie is probably missing that guidance or being an understudy to somebody like Adam Reynolds. So, we've seen JD, he's kind of doubled down on the fact that they let Adam Reynolds go. But in reality, it's been a poor decision for the team in general, and the fact that Lockie was probably thrown in the deep end a little too soon, and he could have benefited greatly from having somebody like Adam Reynolds there beside him.
You also can't overlook the fact that, like, Latrell, for all the, the criticism and the talk, the fact of the matter was he wasn't there again. When they needed him most, he wasn't there for that game because he blew a gasket against Newcastle.
Yep.
It was a moment of frustration that again let his team down. He's got to stop that.
Yep.
He's got to grow up in that respect.
Yep, very much so. The other disappointments, I mean, you talk about it. You have a look at these top four teams. Penrith, Nathan Cleary. The Warriors, Sean Johnson. The Broncos, Adam Reynolds. The Storm, Jerome Hughes. The importance of a good halfback can't be understated. Even you saw, I know, the Tigers were terrible at the weekend, but Daly Cherry Evans had a field day. I do love, I don't cheer a lot for Manly, but when he looked up and Jake Trbojevic was screaming for the ball on his 200th game to score that try, was amazing. It was a great scene, and you saw Cherry was only too happy to pass the ball over. He was having a field day, wasn't he, Cherry Evans?
Mate, he's playing great football for a 34-year-old man, and like in the argument for the Kangaroos number 7 jumper, I know Nathan got it at the end of last year, and Nathan is clearly the standout halfback in the competition. But gee whiz, when you think of what Cherry Evans' form in a Manly side that's missed the finals, you can't say anything negative towards him. He was the captain of the winning Queensland team in Origin. Gee, it's a debate.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate debate who gets that number 7 jumper for the Test series.
Yeah. Well, and interesting to see with Manly what they do now, because Mick Carrianis had a yarn over the weekend that they've tapped a couple of blokes who are under contract and said that if you can get deals elsewhere, you can leave. KO Weeks, Kelma Tuolangi only just arrived there this season from the Tigers. Ben Condon, Carl Lawton, Zach Fulton's another one. They've got Luke Brooks coming in, who can take his barbecue with him to Brookvale. But with if Cherry's still in that form and you get a fit Tom Trbojevic, who knows where they can go next year?
I thought to myself, though, watching on the weekend with Cooler, he's exceptional. His speed, when he went past Jerome Buller, and he looked like he was stuck in quicksand, and Cooler went past him. I think he finished with like 258 run metres and 2 tries. It was like 15 tackle busts, all these try assists, line break assists. If Turbo comes back and he's not at his peak, he plays like he did this year, would you move him to the centres and try and develop Cooler as your fullback going forward? I know it's not a debate when Turbo at his brilliant best, but on what we saw this year, gee whiz, I reckon it's an argument going into next season.
Well, there's a lot of you look at some of the fullbacks. They're talking about Parramatta about whether they find a game break or another fullback to give Clint Gutherson potentially some time in the centres, because he plays. He's revs off the chart for 80 minutes, and Jack Whiten moving to the centres full time at South when he goes. So there's an argument there to say, look, with Tom's injuries as well, maybe you do that and lessen the load on him. But
and it lessens the load. That's the other important factor. It lessens the load. I found a fullback for him.
Yeah.
I found one on the weekend. What about that young fella that come off the bench for the Storm? Is it Suafalogo?
Suafalogo, yeah.
What about that?
Yeah.
What about his
He's
try?
another one, yeah.
When he combined with Pappenhausen. That was one of the most brilliant plays of the season.
It was actually really brilliant to see, because obviously those two have worked together, and the reality is that if Sua stays at Melbourne, then he's probably going to be stuck behind Ryan Pappenhausen. But honestly, and I know it was just one game, but he just glides. He was just gliding on the field, and you could tell he just oozes talent and X factor. And I think Melbourne are going to have trouble keeping him, especially if he wants to play at fullback.
Well, he's on deck till the end of 2025, and so him and Jonah Pezzett, they've got a couple of these guys there who are willing to be Sunshine Coast Falcons for a little bit to do this, but. We've known Fatima, the Storm. You've done Pathways pieces on the Storm, and they've had this kid in their back pocket, knowing that when he comes, and I've been waiting for him to debut, and when he does, and you see that, you go, "Oh, that's good. I love rugby league."
When you look at how well he went, and yet you're 100% right. When someone pointed out when I was doing my rookies list last year, and they said, "Look at the YouTube videos of this kid," and it's just like, wow. He's so fast and so breathtaking, but it's like young Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. But how long can you deny that talent? Can you deny it for another 2 years? Because Pappenhausen's not going anywhere.
No.
And then you've got, Warbrick and Xavier Coates on the wings. And how does he fit into the mate? You've got Nick Meaney that's playing tremendous football. But then he was such an X factor the other day.
I don't think it's so much as denying him. I remember the first time Frank Panisi told me about him. That was all the way back in 2021 when we were up in Queensland, because the NRL went up there for COVID. And he was convinced back then that even though there were some other players coming through, that he'd be the next Victorian junior to debut for the club. And over the last couple of years, I constantly asked Frank about it. How's Suma going? Is he going to play yet? Is he going, he's doing well, but he's, just not ready, and they refused to rush him. And I think what we saw on the weekend was a result of Melbourne's patience with him. So, yes, how long can he be denied? But them being patient with him and not rushing him in has clearly also benefited him.
No question, but where does he fit into the equation? Because Pappenhausen, again, he's not going anywhere.
No.
Yeah.
Like Pappenhausen, when he gets back to his best, which he's showing he will be, he's there. And you've got these two great wingers. I just don't know how you fit him into the equation.
Crawls, do you remember 20 years ago when the Storm basically announced that they were moving on Kiwi international Richard Swain? Richie Swain. Great hooker. Really good hooker in his own right. And they had this young kid from Brisbane they were bringing in, Cameron Smith. And you go, geez, what are they doing? Swain's a good player.
Yeah.
Well, we saw what happened. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do now with these guys.
Yeah, well, they've in the past, I guess only a few years ago, they had a bit of a conundrum down there too, didn't they? Because who was there? Billy Slater, of course, Billy Slater was there. But then they had a lineup of fullbacks behind him. They had Pappenhausen. Jerome Hughes was playing fullback then. Drinkwater was in the system. If I remember correctly, Drinkwater got first crack and then something happened there. Hughes got moved in the halves and then Pappenhausen started playing off the bench and then boom, everything changed. Yeah. So it can change. But
and it's similar to, Cameron Smith and then who came after him for a moment there. It seemed like Brandon Smith had sort of surpassed Harry Grant as the guy who they thought would be their number 9, and look how that's worked out. So, anything's possible.
But even for this final series, he's just got that X factor that can completely turn a game.
Yeah.
No, it'll be interesting to see if he gets another go on the back of that.
Yeah, well, what do the Storm do with their backline against the Broncos? Because you have Ryan Pappenhausen, who started his first game at fullback last weekend. Nick Meaney's been tremendous. Justin Olam's been out of the side for a couple of weeks in reserve grade, trying to fix whatever Bellamy thinks is he's not doing right there. You've got Remus Smith and young Tonamapia, and as you said with Warbrick and Xavier Coates on the wings. Some decisions to be made. Someone's missing out.
I'd be inclined to think, and I didn't think this before the weekend. Up until then, I thought you'd stick with Meaney. I'd go with Pappenhausen now. And I think Bellamy will stick with the centres he's been playing with prior to this week. And I think that's probably the only change. But Pappenhausen for mine, and then Meaney to the bench.
I wonder if they'll put Meaney in the centres or not. But they need there is that X factor, that 14 role that and Meaney's been tremendous. So what do you think they're going to do?
Considering it's such a big game, and Ryan Pappenhausen did get through the weekend unscathed, I could see potentially going with Ryan Pappenhausen. And you have to have Nick Meaney there somewhere. And he does provide utility value. Like Meaney can play, at fullback, in the halves, in the outside backs. If you're going to go with Pappenhausen at number 1, then you probably go with Nick Meaney at 14.
Yeah.
But to beat, I'm confident they'll beat the Broncos. The Broncos they've had a lot of their gun players that have been rested for a while now. Like Adams still hasn't come back from that calf injury, and Carrigan's been out, and it's like, I don't know, I just don't know. But to beat Penrith, to go to that next level, they're going to need Munster to get better. I think Munster's been really good this year, but he hasn't been Munster. Not at club level, I don't think. I think I'm expecting him to go to another level. But yeah, that's again, I'll go back to Suafar Loco. You just wonder if you just make room for him on the bench. He could be the guy that comes in and provides that point of difference.
I'm just going to get Andrew Webster on the phone and tell him that you've already written them off by saying to beat Penrith, because the Warriors get first crack at him this weekend. What about Master v Apprentice? Ivan Cleary and Andrew Webster. The storylines that this final series is going to bring out is amazing, because who would have thought the Warriors have gone from 15th to 4th? And we do this stat every year that there's always a team that's outside the 8 and miraculously makes the top 4. I think only 3 occasions in the NRL era it hasn't happened. And who would have picked the Warriors? We're all talking about whether Manly were the ones to do it, or whoever it would be. Question though, are you concerned with the walloping they copped at the weekend, the Warriors, going in on the back of a loss, or because they rested so many players, it won't play on their minds?
I don't think it plays on their mind. It's no different to the Broncos and Storm in the fact that they had so many missing. The Warriors had a lot of players out. Was it 8 out of that game?
Yeah.
Take into account the Dolphins were also missing at least 3 of their better players. But no, I don't think it makes a difference because none of the big guns played. I guess the big question there is Tohu Harris any chance of playing, or is he gone for the season? Because that was the early mail.
Yeah, I had spoken to the Warriors about it last week, and initially it was definitely not playing in round 27, a possibility for the final series, but they were still waiting to assess the extent of it. What we do know though is Luke Metcalf is done for the season, isn't he? So they do have Tamari Martin, who's returned from a broken leg, so they've got somebody to come in to deal with that. But Tohu Harris, it's more the experience that they miss without him being available for the final series if it is a season-ending injury.
And Tamari Martin played on the weekend, and look, he was sound. He defensively, even some of his past selections and that weren't great. It's not ideal to come in on the back of one game and try and take on the Panthers. And again, no criticism towards the Warriors because they've been absolutely fantastic. But that first half performance from the Panthers on the weekend, were they 26-0 up? And they were so clinical.
Yeah.
It was just like that. They are. Cooper Cronk said after the game, he's won 6 Grands Finals and he's been a part of back-to-back premiers at the Roosters and, the side of the NRL era at Melbourne. And he said if the Panthers go on and win the comp this year, they're the best side that I've ever seen. And he preface that with the fact that he didn't watch the Parramatta Eels of the early 80s.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Eels, now that they're not in the finals, there's no one to beat Penrith, is there? But just back on the Warriors for a second, a player I love, Josh Curran. He was terrific on the weekend. He worked his butt off, and he made a try-saving tackle down right on their line, and then he got the ball back, and they were under the pump, and he shrugged off. He just kept going. It looked like he was held, and he busted through, and then he beat another tackle. He made 23 metres when they had set after set after set defending, and then he just made the post-contact metres on that one hit up alone. He made that play the ball, and then he was on his haunches afterwards to try and get them down. That's what this Warriors side's built on, and that's what Andrew Webster's brought to this team. And if I'm Penrith, I'm a little nervous because Andrew Webster knows this team. He knows his Penrith team really well. And you saw Parramatta showed how a way to beat Penrith the other week. You got to take them. I thought they were far too conservative. The Cowboys at the weekend. You're not gonna out grind Penrith because they'll do it. They'll kick it to the corners. They'll put you on the back foot, and they've just got that explosiveness in their back line where they can beat you at a pinch. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not writing the Warriors off at all. I think they're a big hope of going there and doing something special. I don't know why. I just got this feeling.
Yeah, well, the Warriors have got what the Cowboys didn't show up with. I agree with you that you've got to try and beat Penrith with a little bit of switching things up. But I thought there was a couple of occasions on the weekend where I thought Chad Townsend went the wrong option. He threw that whaling pass over the top, the Hail Mary. They went screaming down the other end. He came up with another poor choice at one stage where I thought he really needed to get a reset and keep the pressure on him. He didn't do that. You're right. They had such a lack of enthusiasm in the first half. It was really disappointing.
Yeah.
But I also thought the Panthers. Did you see that moment where Crichton pushed off Scott Drinkwater for the first try?
Yeah.
And gave him the finger, and then go back to round 16. I think I went and had a look at Dylan Edwards had coughed up a possession, and then Drinkwater on the final play of extra time has scored that unbelievable try and ran behind doing this to Edwards. There's no question in the world that they went out to get Drinkwater.
People don't forget. They can
Penrith don't forget.
No, well, the Cowboys did the same thing, didn't they? When they Todd Payton put up the scoreline from the Tigers game early in the year, didn't he?
Oh, yeah,
when they got beaten by 60, then they beat the Tigers by 70. They sit there and go, it's just another game. We don't focus on it. But the motivational techniques of these lot, yeah. But
you've got Fanua Blake. You've got, like you said, Curran. They've got Sean Johnson. They've got some wonderful players.
Well, that's what I was going to say on the back of the Curran chat. I mean, we've spoken a lot about what Sean Johnson has brought to the side this year and how important his form has been, but there's no doubt their forward pack has gone under the radar and have been the unsung heroes of this team. Like you said, Curran, Adam Fanua-Blake. I would say, there was runs there where he was in better form than what Payne Haas was for the Broncos. Obviously, there's Tony Harris. He might be injured,
but of the year for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So, and I think that's where the Warriors can match it with Penrith. It's going to be a massive battle up front, but the Warriors forward pack is going to be up for it.
Wade Egan's the other one too, outstanding.
Former Panther, good Lithgow boy. They're all good Lithgow boys.
Are they?
Yeah, we
Not
are.
a bad one.
Yeah, but second phase play, strong down the middle and discipline from Sean Johnson with his kicking game to really put Penrith on the back foot, make Brian Toto run 200 metres. Make Sania Taruva, who was, again, terrific at the weekend. Make him run 200 metres. They get so much out of their backs to help that great forward pack anyway. Yeah. So make them work for it. Make them earn that if they're going to do that. So I really look forward to that. And I'm glad the NRL put that game on at 4:05 Saturday. If you're wondering why, just look at the time zone. That's a 6:05 kickoff on Saturday in New Zealand. I'll be really interested to see what the TV viewership's going to be like over in New Zealand, because I've got to check when the All Blacks are up. But that's going to be a must-watch game. So elimination finals. Sharks, Roosters. Sharks have had their place in the finals for a couple of weeks. Roosters did the business last week and then had to wait for the results to go their way. Once the Cowboys were blown off the park, they knew they were there. So they knew that their place was assured, I think the Roosters get the Sharks for mine on this weekend.
They've got the big guns. They've got the experience. Like Teddy, for all his troubles earlier in the season and his struggles through Origin and everything, that try he scored the other day was the sign of an absolute champion player.
Teddy played one of his best games on the weekend so far this year.
You've got Manu more than likely coming back in the side. Luke Keary's playing outstanding. Sam Walker is now, being given that licence to thrill. They've got a tough forward pack. And the Sharks on the weekend, it was a really tough game against the Raiders, but the Raiders are struggling to score points, and the Sharks were too. And until that send-off, they got 3 late tries. That game was in the balance. I agree with you. I think the Roosters have got too much senior strike power. And the fact, what about the fact that it's playing in front of 11,000 people?
Would you move the game, Fatima, from PointsBet?
No, I wouldn't. You earn what you earn after 27 rounds, and Cronulla have earned a home final, so they deserve that. The fans deserve
rebuilt.
that.
It's at what, less than half capacity or about half capacity?
Yeah. I know, I understand
That's
that,
not
but
right for a final.
Yeah, but how many people fit at Penrith? 6.
More than 11.
22 and a half.
22 and a half. That's, I'm sure if they moved, Penrith to Bankwest, they could probably fill that out too. So, the Sharks have earned their home final. The fans deserve the home final.
The 11,000 of them, eh?
Yep.
was someone saying that Russell Jackson, our chief of staff, is saying we should do a live site at Allianz and have 40,000 there to watch it. So
it's such a shame though, but that you've got that beautiful stadium there. You've got the Homebush Stadium, you've got CommBank, you've got all these great stadiums.
Yeah.
And we're playing it on a building site.
Well, Dean Ritchie had it last week, didn't he? The 1.1 billion in shiny new toys of stadiums in Sydney, and none of them are getting used.
In the old days,
if we switch completely to neutral venues in week 1, fine. If there's an argument to be made that we should be, selling out these big stadiums, that we do have them there to be used. Why not use them? That's fine. But to sort of make one side, give away that home ground advantage, I don't think it's fair.
There's a reason for it, though, because Penrith Stadium's not being rebuilt at the moment. The Warriors and every other team, Newcastle, have got that great stadium up there, but they're not a work zone. That's the difference, I think. Like, I just think it's someone at the NRL should have been brave enough to say, this is not happening. We need to go to one of the big stadiums and try and get as many bums on seats as we can.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Knights Raiders. Are the Raiders any hope, Fatima? Come on.
Have you seen my tipping in the last month? So by that form guide, yes, they are. But am I delusional? That's hopeful, optimistic. Look, obviously they lose a lot with whatever happens to Seb Chris. We haven't checked actually if anything's come
if he
through
doesn't
from the
get
match
suspended
review
for
committee.
3 or 4 weeks.
There's a chance that. Do you think that might be referred? It was pretty bad. It was one of those ones where you
see
the replays. But the point in that is he's been incredible for Canberra this year, whether he's played in the outside backs or at fullback. So they're really going to miss him. Obviously, without Josh Papali'i, what they do with Jack Wyden is an interesting one. Wyden had moments where he was dangerous and explosive off the mark, and looked like at times he was the only one that was going to create anything. So I wonder, if he's better suited back in the halves with the ball in his hand. But look, the Knights are on a massive roll in front of what will be a feverish home crowd at McDonald Jones Stadium. Does the rational side of my brain think they can do it? No. Does the passionate side of my brain think they can? Yeah. And Canberra are that kind of team, right? And we saw it, like Crawls, like you said, they were in the game up until Seb Chris, got sent off. And they're the kind of team that if they show up like they did against the Sharks, ready for the battle, ready for the grind, it's a battle of attrition, then you can't write them off. But Newcastle, I think, are just maybe a bit too red hot at the moment.
Well, Crawls, you and I talked off air about that one moment that kind of summed up where the Raiders were at, weren't they? With Jack Whiten was playing left centre and he come across to the right side of the field searching some ball. All of a sudden, line break, 40 metres downfield. They punched it up the next hit up, and then instead of throwing it wide, putting something on that fourth tackle where they needed points, they went to a forward, went to a prop.
Yeah, Fogarty went to the prop, and I just thought to myself at that moment, why? Why have you done that, mate? You've got to try and win the game. To the Raiders' credit, I truly believe they've overachieved this year. When you look at their key spine members, young Wolford tries his guts out, but he's on minimum wage. Fogarty is a tough halfback with a great kicking game, especially a long kicking game, but he hasn't got that touch of class that a lot of the top 8 teams have in the 7 jersey.
Yep.
Jack, I agree with you on the weekend. He was there, along with Rapana, their most dangerous player. The only argument I'd say about keeping him in the centres potentially is that Jack's been trying too hard this year to be the ball player. And those passes have been sailing over the sideline. He just hasn't been switched on enough. At least on the weekend, he went out with that run mentality, and that's when Jack's at his best. They've got, Rapana was great at fullback yesterday, but they just lack the class that Newcastle has.
Yep.
And that's where they're going to struggle. They're certainly a very tough football side.
Why haven't they
And they'll
invested
turn up
in
and
their
have a
spine?
go.
Why haven't they invested in their spine with the money? You look, Xavier Savage was supposed to be the guy that replaced Charles Nickel-Clockstar, but
Yeah.
he's been in reserve grade all year. Whiten hasn't, he's sort of been between 5'8" and centre. Starling and Danny Levi's the other guy we haven't really spoken about. He just came back through reserve grade at the
Two
weekend.
serious injuries throughout the season. Danny Levi was bought on a shoestring budget, but he's got a touch of class about him. But he's had a wretched run with injuries this year. If you go back to where things sort of turned for the Raiders, you talk about why haven't they got better players in these key positions. Well, remember they had George Williams. And there was a drama there, and George left, and then they were left without anyone, and they got Fogarty after he was basically pushed out the door from the Titans. Josh Hodgson was, the best hooker Canberra's had since Steve Walters, basically. But again, because of injuries and other issues, you know what I mean? They've gone through a transformation. They haven't been, and it's proven over the years to be a tough place to want to get players to go to.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think they've done a pretty good. The young Adrian Trevelyan is the other one who, again, big things were expected. He was the one that came through the schoolboy system up in North Queensland, and Vossi actually had him in his best ever schoolboy side. But he's had so many injuries, so many injuries, and such limited football that he probably hasn't come on as quick as a lot of people thought. So there's reasons for all these things, but the fact of the matter is, at the moment, I can't see him. I can't see him beating Newcastle, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, it'll be tough for them, especially the Knights. Look, if the Knights win this one, the elimination final, they will then go on to play the loser of Panthers Warriors. So, if it's the Warriors, they have to go to New Zealand and beat them over there. That's going to be a hell of a clash. Even them against Penrith, if Penrith somehow get upset, that's a big game. They're afraid of no one at the moment, are they? And what about, we haven't touched on it, but the Dom Young try on the weekend, my goodness.
Both of them were pretty good.
The first one was nearly the best finish you've ever seen.
Unbelievable.
It defied physics.
For a guy that's about 14 foot tall. Like, seriously,
and a big body
to do
too.
what he did.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. The second one was great too, but the first one was out of this world. God, I just can't believe that the Knights have produced this player. Well, Alex McKinnon signed him from England, and I remember when Dom Young first came across, I thought, Alex, what have you done here? Surely to Christ there's a young bloke in the Hunter Valley that can do a better job than this bloke. But I did.
Yeah.
Because
Which
he was
fair,
so
it was a fair assessment at the time.
he was so young and inexperienced
Raw.
and raw. But he is, now you look at him and you think, why aren't the Knights keeping him?
Yeah.
Because he's overtaken Tamana Tahu and Aquila Uarte this year as the season top try scorer for the club. And yeah, it's such a shame that he's going. But look, it could finish with a bang. But yeah, Mobbsy, that was something else.
Fatima, they've got to win this week, elimination final, the semi-final the week after, the prelim final the week after. That's 12 wins in a row to make a grand final.
Yep.
Is there an argument that they've hit their ceiling. They've peaked too. Well, I don't say peak too early because it's not the right. But some teams like to have a little bit of a hiccup because you learn more in your losses than you do in your wins. And that's a challenge for Adam O'Brien with his side. But that's the issue for mine.
Yeah, it's such a hard one to say, right? Because maintaining that level is difficult, in the regular season, let alone finding another gear against the best teams in the competition in the final series. But we saw, they got the job done without Kalen Ponga, which I think is a really, really positive sign for Newcastle. And I just think they're riding, like I think you said it, they probably feel like they're unbeatable. And you need that kind of cockiness and that little bit of arrogance going into a final series. So if they can stay injury-free, then, I don't see why not. I mean, if they're facing Penrith, you said potentially in week 2, that will be a very difficult task. But, anything's possible with this team.
Ponga's fitness is the key, isn't it? Because you talk about Mobbsy, did they need a loss? No, they needed to show on the weekend that they could win without Ponga. Good point. But when he comes back, they say with his AC shoulder injury, the needle will take away all the pain. I don't know enough about that, but he needs to be at his brilliant best for them to continue on through this final series, especially against, like the Raiders are a very tough football side.
Yep.
But beyond that, either the Panthers or the Warriors, mate, they need him at his brilliant best.
Would you, I know it's win or go home time, but would you be tempted to start Ponga on the bench and maybe go with a Clune or Gamble?
No, he's this is an elimination
thanks.
final. It's
so Fatima, would you be tempted?
No.
Depending on how bad this AC joint injury is, they do run the risk of a team like Canberra who will not take a backward step and probably put a target on Ponga's back. They will send a lot of traffic at him early to test that shoulder.
So you're agreeing with me? Bench him.
No, but you've still got to have him on the field for every single minute.
Yeah, it's elimination.
Do or die.
There's no next week if you lose.
Yeah, all right, okay. Forgive me for trying to create some podcast content, you guys. Anyway, right, well, we might wrap this up. So you guys go out and enjoy your Mad Mondays. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, and because we need you on deck, because back again next week for more.
Can't wait.